exam. And what I mean by that is, as someone who sat through the MCAT, which was around a 7 to 8 hour exam, and as someone who also took the Step 1 exam, which is the first board exam required to get a medical license for a doctor, those exams are exclusively online, and that brings upon like a new set of challenges when we talk about test fatigue, and just test taking strategies. So something that's very, very important is that does not seem important at first is that students are aware of the format of the tools given to them in the online platform, and the students just have the capacity and the stamina to take a test online. And what I mean by that is the littlest of things, such as things like how zoomed in you are, or things like whether you need glasses or whether you prefer to wear contacts the day of, whether you are used to looking at a screen for multiple hours at a time, whether you are aware of the tools that they give you to choose the best answer, those are all things that it's very, very important to be familiar with on test day. You do not want to walk into exam and figure out for the first time on the exam what the test format is. That is just setting you up not for success. You don't want to spend time in the test to, reinvent the wheel. You want to go in prepared, knowing what to expect, and just taking the test, considering it as just another day. So the first thing that I want to go over is the sample sheet provided by the SHSAT sort of organization as a whole, and just really emphasize the importance of understanding each of the tools and when to use them. So for example, here they give an inventory of the tools specifically for the English language arts sections. And let's just go over them one at a time. So the first tool is a highlighter. Highlight text you want to note as important. So it seems like there are three features here. One is the strike out feature of the highlight, which likely means they will allow you to erase the highlight that you originally entered. One blue colored highlight and one pink colored highlight. Now, again, I'm not emphasizing these things, just to, basically waste time. I'm emphasizing these things because even in this small individual tool, you can think of different strategies. For example, students might want to use the blue color to highlight a transition or a change in idea or a change in the story sequence, whereas they may want to use the pink color to emphasize important themes or emphasize sort of ideas that have been repeated and emphasized. So just in this individual tool, we see a way to start reading the passage critically and be more engaged with the passage. I would say this is a very difficult thing for students, especially on online exams, and something very difficult for me as well, where for most of our lives, at least in elementary and middle school and somewhat of high school, we've been very used to and trained on how to use paper and pencil to engage with our text. We have been taught to underline things, circle things with the pencil as we're reading our text, to stay engaged. And while that has been extremely helpful, um, at the same time, we have to adapt to this new format of everything going online. This is why I want to emphasize, just the importance of this one feature. You can use it in so many different ways already. And again, you want to have this strategy and you want to have this technique confirmed that it works for you and used multiple times before you walk in the test itself. You don't want to start coming up with these ideas on test day. So I think something that I can already recommend is for students to think about how they want to use the highlight feature to highlight the important parts of the text and to distinguish between different parts of the text as well. Answer eliminator. Now, this is a very, very important tool, especially in the English language arts section. While in mathematics, you may be doing calculation ultimately to get to a final answer. In English language arts, the whole point is to take a passage in its totality, understand a question, and understand what the best answer to that question will be with consideration of the passage. So it is very, very, I would say, it's difficult and also not ideal to just answer an English language arts section question by just choosing the right answer. You want to both choose the right answer and eliminate options that you know are not correct. That is the best way to score well on these exams. You're increasing the probability of you getting the answer correct. Even if there's a question that you may not know the answer to, if you eliminate a few answer choices, you're just increasing the probability and the percentage chance of you getting the question correct. So this is also a very important skill to know. Notepad, make notes for reference across the text. Now, once again, a very important feature that you might otherwise gloss over. I would always encourage my students to take 1 to 2, 3 word notes in the English language arts section for every paragraph to quickly summarize the purpose of the paragraph. And I'll try to show you how to do that live now as well. Um, that is also really important because it allows you to sort of make a almost trackpad or a summary of the entire passage through annotations on the side. And oftentimes, students may know you get questions about the main idea. You get questions about how the author transitioned from one point to another. And if you have this little mini summary notes on the side of your passage, you sort of save yourself the time of, having to read the whole thing again. You also save yourself, sort of the panic of feeling like you have to read every of the entire passage again. And lastly, you have a basically outline of the passage itself, which can serve really helpful and allow you to see when the author is making certain transition points, when their tone is changing, etc. Um, Line reader masks cover the text surrounding certain lines for focus. I think it'll be easiest if I show you this on the actual platform. Mark any questions so you can later return it. Now, this is a feature that I would want to, again, just highlight for students to be aware of, but also to be cautious of. And again, this is why it is so important to start thinking about the SHSAT so early in advance, because really these tests do require hard work to study. They do require, a certain baseline, strength in English and math skills. But I will also say that they also do require good test taking strategies. And oftentimes that is what can make the difference between an average score and an excellent score. Now, I have always preferred to answer questions in sequence and answer every question, even if I'm unsure of the answer. I personally do not like to go back, leave a question blank, and then go back to it. There are a few reasons for that. Let's say you run out of time towards the end, you don't want to rush yourself thinking, oh my God, I still have to go back to another question. Let's say that, um, are just getting stressed at the prospect of having to go back and having an omitted question. So for me personally, I always like to answer in sequence, and I always like to just choose an answer even if I'm not 100% sure. So for me, I do use the bookmark feature to flag a question that I am not 100% sure of, but I always make sure to answer the question itself. And again, this is a strategy that works for me. To be honest, I would recommend this to most students as well because I do think it's important to take on a standardized test to treat one question independently and then just move on. But again, it does depend on student to student. So this is something that you also want to have finalize in your strategy pool before taking the exam. And then gloss words, pop-up definition. So once again, very important. This is a tool they're giving you. They're giving you a definition of a word. It is for your benefit. You want to know how to use this tool. Um, so that is that. If there are any questions so far, please let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm just going to give people a quick 30 seconds to a minute just to read this section before I explain. Okay. So, what is important to look at here? As you can tell, the reading comprehension section is now um, both emphasizing informational genres and literary genres. Now, this is also a change compared to earlier SHSATs, where I would say the primary focus would be on fictional passages. Now you see that there are emphasizing both fiction and nonfiction passages. I would say an excellent way to prepare for this off the bat is you want to make sure that your child or you yourself as a student is just engaging in reading. And I know that nowadays, it's hard to find time to read, and the more and more we're transitioning to online things, again, it's hard to read. But this is where having the test online is kind of an advantage. You can read, newspaper articles. You can read sort of anything on your phone, on your computer, and that really is preparing you for the exam. Um, the more you read, just the more comfortable you will be getting with these different types of passages. And the fact that you're doing it on an electronic device is already preparing you for the exam as well. So I want students to be aware of the fact that there are both of these genres on the exam. And this is good for you to already know because this can allow you to target your weaknesses. If you feel that you are stronger in, fictional passages and more literary texts, you should focus on the informational genres and vice versa. So that's another important thing that I wanted to highlight because this is also a change from previous exams. Now, I'm just going to go through a few tips that the test taking organization is giving to you. And I also am going to go through these more individually. And I think really the meat of this webinar is going to be actually doing practice questions together and using the platform as well. So I'm just going to give people a few seconds to read through this. Okay. So, I'm just gonna skim through these because some of these we already talked about. Reading the text carefully, that comes from using the tools properly and making sure you're using them to the best of your ability. Taking notes or highlighting, I've already discussed. Read the question carefully. Now, this is also something that I want to encourage students to be aware of what strategy works best for you. I've always tended to read the entire passage first and then go to the question. Other students prefer to read the question first and then read the passage. What I will say is that I will always encourage you to read, even if you're reading the question, I encourage you to read the whole passage before answering the question. There are so many cases when in a literary text or in any piece of writing, one word or one line can completely change the whole meaning of the entire passage. Um, it is very dangerous to answer a question without reading the whole passage in total. And even, for example, they ask you to think, do you need to focus on details in one paragraph or multiple paragraphs? So that in of itself goes to show you that a very common trap that I think is very tempting for students is they read the question, they think, okay, the question mentions go to line 9, and they read line 8 and 10 and line 9. But again, I think that is a very dangerous thing to do. So even if you are reading the question first, I do recommend before answering the question, read the whole text. And that might mean that for one passage, you read all the questions first and then read the whole passage in once. Um, or you might, again, which is my preference for these types of exams, you might read the question, or you might read the entire passage first and then answer the question. My point is that you do not want to be experimenting on the day of the exam. You want to have a strategy that you've used consistently down pat. Determine the answer before reading the answer option. So again, this is why it's important to read the whole text to have a basic understanding. Plan your tools. I've already emphasized this. Plan your time is also important. So now there are a few sample questions here. I would like to actually go to a practice exam that is shown online just to allow students and everyone here to get a sense of the format. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Um, so as you can see here, I just want to quickly go through the actual tools. You know, that are important for taking the test. We've already again gone through them. Um, it's kind of interesting how well the SHSAT syncs. So here they are telling you my battery percentage, which actually matches the battery percentage on my actual computer. Here they're saying change the background and foreground color. So again, even little things like this, students might prefer dark mode. I think actually for example, most recently took my step one exam, which is also like an 8 to 10 hour exam in this type of mode. I preferred this is a little bit easier on my eyes, so this is what I preferred. But again, there are many different colors. This might be relevant for students who are colorblind or things like that. Again, just things to think about. I'm going to use a dark mode right now because even now my eyes are straining just looking at a really white screen. Um, you also see enable magnifier, right? So let's see. So this is actually like really magnifying on the text. This I honestly don't really see how helpful it is, but that is there for you and you can disable it. Now there's show line reader mask. So this is if you want to sort of individually just go line by line to keep focus. You can also, blur out more lines. You can increase it. Again, I personally don't really think this is that helpful, but I just wanted to show you all. Um, and now we have our bookmark features, right? So if you want to go back to this, and you want to flag it that it's, confusing to you, that's something to look at. If you want to eliminate answer choices, so this is something that I wanted to show you. This is like very nice. The way that they make it so obvious you've eliminated this choice. Now it's not even a consideration. And again, the global notepad. So I was kind of testing this out before I met with you all. The global notepad you can use. So for example, the way I would use this is I would have this open as I'm reading the passage, and you can sort of annotate. Again, annotations, the purpose of annotations are to be brief, but to just be engaging and allow you to guide the text. So the way I would annotate is P1, P2, P3. The paragraph one, two, three, and then just 1 to 3 words about what the big idea is. So if nobody has any questions, I'm going to proceed with trying this um, right now, actually. Um, and I don't see any questions, and so I'm just gonna get started. I actually did get a question. Will the notes say when you go in different questions? Yes, I believe it will. We can actually try that right now. So test, test, test. And again, let's see if it's saved. So I go to the next question and it's saved. So again, just all things to be aware of before you take the exam. Now, I didn't mean to choose an answer choice, but we can just ignore that for now. So what was my strategy, like I mentioned? Have the notepad open and be engaged, and also it's important to just be cognizant of time. Someone asked if the notepad will remain for different passages. I believe it will. Let's also check that right now. This passage is called Snowy Mountain, so I'm going to keep proceeding to the next passage, and then this is a new passage, Scribe Like an Egyptian. So I'm just going to go back to the global notepad and again, scribe like Egyptian. So this is actually like a really amazing feature. It allows you to really have an outline of the entire exam. So you can even use the global notepad to tell yourself, wow, scribe like Egyptian was a hard passage. So you know that, if you have extra time over the test, what do you want to prioritize? You want to prioritize this passage. So this is actually like a really, really nice tool that I think is really worth considering using. And I've explained the different ways to consider using it. Um, so let's start going through this. So again, notepad open. All right. Snowy Mountains by John Goldflesher. Higher and still more high, palaces made for clouds above the dingy city roofs, blue, white like angels with broad wings, pillars of the sky at rest, and mountains from the great plateau uprise. So paragraph one, again, this is going to be very brief. On the real test, time matters. But what is sort of the main takeaway I'm taking from this first stanza? Higher and still more high, palaces made for clouds above the dingy city roofs, blue, white like angels with broad wings. Likely this is referring to clouds. Pillars of the sky at rest, the mountains from the great plateau uprise. Okay, so what do I see? I see this emphasis on nature. What do I also see? I see like a contrast between How the author describes nature versus how the author describes the city roofs, right? The city roofs are called dingy. Nature is sort of described in a more, positive way. Palaces made for cloud, um, blue white like angels with broad wings, pillars of the sky at rest. So actually the angels, blue white like angels with broad wings actually is referring to mountains. So the mountains, and this is again the point of the passage, snowy mountains. The mountains are high and more high. They're like palaces for clouds. They're above city roofs. They're blue white like angels with wings. There's pillars or foundations of the sky at rest. Um, mountains uprise. So now I can even, again, thinking about my highlight and the fact that I have two different features, now I can choose to highlight the city ruse or the city description in one color and highlight, descriptions or emphasis of the nature or mountains in one color. So again, these are things that you should be thinking about critically as you're reading the passage. The world heeds them not. Okay, so who are they talking about? They're talking about the mountains. The world doesn't pay attention to them. And actually, I'm just going to change my color scheme because it makes more sense that mountains are like a nature green. So I'm just going to change that. The world heeds them not. They have been here for too long a time. The world makes war on them. Tunnels their granite cliffs, splits down their shining sides, plasters their cliff with soap advertisements, destroys the lonely fragments of their peace. So I'm going to highlight this in sort of that olive color because what is this describing? This is describing how humans have been treating mountains or nature. So paragraph two, I can just say like war on nature. And again, what is this doing? It's just summarizing the passage for me as I'm reading. I will know exactly where to look when questions arise. Vaster and still more vast, peak after peak, pile after pile, wilderness still untamed, to which the future is as was the past. Barrier spread by God, sunning their shining foreheads, barrier broken down by those who not need, the joy of time resisting stone born stone. The mountains swing along the south horizon of the sky, welcoming with wide floors of blue green ice, the mist that dance and dry before the sun. So this is sort of implying that um there is a sort of like resilience or endurance of the mountains, that they're still vast, they're still untamed, they're still welcoming, blue green ice, etc. So I would just say like persistence of nature. And again, like, if you don't understand a specific stanza, like I would say this stanza was a little bit more challenging. That is okay. As you continue to explore the passage through questions, you will start to understand it better. Okay, so now this is my global notepad, which I can always have as a handy dandy tool to like take a high level overview of the passage. Now it's important for me to read the question and see what they said. All right, description in the first stanza. And for the question, I'm just going to use green to highlight the important parts of the question. But again, for this, for the text, I use a color coding scheme to, better understand the passage. Description in the first stanza establishes central idea of the poem by. So again, what is the question asking? The question is asking for you to relate the first stanza to the central or overall idea of the poem. Therefore, it is very important to both read that first stanza and the whole poem to understand its central idea. Now, what I want to clarify is again the common trap. If you just read the first stanza, you're not going to know how it relates to the whole passage. So it's very, very important to read the whole passage. And I didn't mean to choose answer A. For some reason, I think I just automatically had me populate an answer. I'm not saying whether answer A is correct or incorrect. Um, but what I actually would like to do is if students are in the chat, I would like them to take a possible attempt at this question and maybe give me a minute or two. I'll give you guys a minute or two to pick a choice and give me your reasoning, and then we can go through it together. Okay. So, paragraph one, let's quickly revisit it. So again, what did our high level overview say? Paragraph one, was about nature. So again, this global notepad is not necessarily going to give you the answer, but I do think it's very helpful to remain engaged within text. Now let's look at our color coding scheme and our highlighting and annotation. We noticed that just in the first paragraph, we already established, that distinct contrast that the author makes between describing the mountains and describing the city-like features. The words used for the mountains are so positive. Palaces, like angels, pillars, they're very grand, they're very um dramatic in a good way. The city, though, is described as dingy. So just in the first paragraph, we kind of see that contrast. And that continues to be developed, as the author continues to describe sort of the negative impacts of cities or the negative impacts of people on nature, right? The world is making war on them being the mountains. The world is tunneling them, splitting them, plastering them, destroying them. So let's go through the choices. And again, it's very important to use process of elimination. Um, A, comparing the length of time the mountains have existed with the time that the city has existed. Is there any mention of time in the first paragraph? I'm hoping that everyone here is saying no. There is no mention of time, made. So that doesn't make sense. So again, for this is almost like a two-part question because you have to understand what the first stanza is saying and then understand how that aligns with the poem. So again, if you're confused about the theme of the poem, you can still likely get to the correct answer by understanding just the first stanza. Choice B, contrasting the grandeur of the mountain with the structures in the city below them. Now, we actually did see that, immediately in the first paragraph, the author, has this contrast, describes the mountains in a lot more positive, sophisticated way compared to cities. This is definitely a probable answer. And I'd like to, point to some of the answers that I got. A couple people wrote B in the passage. That's excellent. And someone also wrote, the fact that the author is literally describing the mountains as big, right? They're higher and they're even higher. They're like palaces. They're angels. They have big, broad wings, etc. So this is definitely a probable answer. Choice C, implying the mountains are a source of inspiration to the people in the city below. So, this might be somewhat like a trick answer because the mountains are described very.
Hey Meryl, sorry to interrupt, but someone started AI companion. Is it okay? I mean, someone just wants to enhance the meeting. It's fine, right?
Yeah, I don't mind. Thanks for letting me know.
I mean, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
fine. I mean, I'm all about AI. I love it. All right, so whoever did it, we're good. I'm gonna approve it.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. Um, what I was saying is that I think this might be like a trick answer because although the mountains are described like very positively, and the word inspiration is sort of a positive word, um, there is no implication that the mountains are inspiration, right? What do we see? Like, what is the relationship between the people and the mountains is what's important to understand. And that relationship, based on what the author describes this, is actually pretty negative, right? The author is saying people are making war on the mountains, they're tunneling, splitting, etc. So the mountains are actually not really inspiring people. That's wrong. D, suggesting the mountains are larger than the people in the city realize. So perhaps also like a trick answer. Yes, there is an emphasis on the largeness and the grandness and the vastness of mountains, but nowhere is it saying that people don't know that. Nowhere is that being implied. When it says the world heeds them not, to pay heed to something means to pay attention to it. And if people are not paying heed to something, that means they're ignoring it or not paying attention to it. It doesn't mean that they're unaware or they don't realize it. So D is also wrong. So the best answer is B, as some students said in the in the chat. And let's just double check. Yes. So the answer choice says it's B. And again, it's very important to understand why every choice is wrong. Okay. Question two. Which detail from the poem reflects the speaker's view that people often fail to appreciate what is familiar? So again, what is the question asking you to do? They're asking you to understand a specific detail, but I will say that it's very important to understand a specific line in the context of where it's said. Sorry, so choice A, mountains from the Great Plateau, line 6. So again, line 6 was in the context of just describing the mountains. This doesn't really make sense. There is no mention of people at all in stanza 1, so this is not correct. Um, stanza 2. They have line 9 is in stanza 2 for choice B. They have been now here for too long a time. So this kind of makes sense. If something is here for a long time, it's likely familiar. And what do we see? Now we see in line 9, if you go to line 9, if we read right above it and right below it, it further adds strength to the question, to this being the answer to the question. Why? Right before line 9, what does it say? The world heeds them not. They have been here for too long. The world makes war on them. So, what is it saying? The world isn't paying attention to mountains. They've been here for too long. The world is actually making war on them. It's not appreciating them, it's actually destroying them. So, choice B once again aligns. Choice C splits down their shining sides. That doesn't make sense either. This is describing an actual action that humans are doing to the mountains. Further, this section is sort of in the midst of multiple lines that are being described of what humans do to mountains. So again, that's really not the emphasis on familiarity. D, to which the future is as was the past. Line 18. Again, line 18 and stanza 3 more so was describing, what do we say based on the notepad? Persistence of nature. So line 18 is in that stanza. That doesn't really make sense either. So likely the best answer is B, and let's see what the answer choice says. Um, yes. Um, exactly. And I think I'm gonna go through these were two like literary questions. I think I'm gonna try to do one more passage that is a little more fact-based before transitioning to math, just so that we get a taste of both passages. This one is kind of lengthy. So as you can see, the nonfiction passages or sort of the non-literary passages are actually a little bit lengthier. So that's also something important to keep in mind. Um, let's, all right, let's try doing this passage. Okay. Um, all right. So once again, I'm gonna have my notepad open and how am I gonna indicate it's a new passage? Again, you can do anything. For me, I think it's just easier for me to make this dash. All right. And same thing, P1, P2, P3. This passage has 4 paragraphs and it has a figure, which will be important to look at. Okay. In ancient Egypt, literacy was the key to success. However, contrary to popular belief, not all Egyptian scribes understood hieroglyphs. Many relied instead on the simple hieratic script for multiple everyday documents generated by the Egyptian bureaucracy. Here you see what? You see that they give you a glossary definition, so you don't need to worry about not knowing the word. Something else that I actually wanted to point to was when I opened this practice exam, there was the option to choose a language. Now, this is important for students, and this is also something I want to emphasize. This is important for students who, may have certain accommodations or may have what they call ELLs, um, which are students who are English language learners. So obviously, a lot of students, may not have English as their first language. They may be learning English. This is an excellent way for students to get directions and footnotes in their native language. However, from my understanding, the test is primarily in English. You will just get the directions and special notes in a different language. So for myself, I also speak another language and I just marked that down. And I can see that they gave me the footnote in that different language, but again, the primary passage is in English. So just something important for students who speak multiple languages. Now, let's keep going. So again, quickly recap the paragraph 1. Ancient Egypt literacy was a key to success. Not all Egyptian scribes understood hieroglyphs. Many relied on hieratic script for everyday documents. So here we just see, the introduction of two things. the glyphs versus the script. So that's my little annotation. Paragraph 2. Hieroglyphs, the words of God, compose a writing system with more than 1,000 distinct characters, the meanings of which were lost for 1,500 years before they were deciphered by Jean-François Champollion in 1822, including both ideograms, which convey a whole world or idea, either concrete or abstract, in a simple sign, and phonograms, either an alphabetic sound or a group of consonants. The writing system was used in formal inscriptions on tomb and temple walls, as well as elaborate funerary papyri. Again, this little underline indicates they define the word. I hover over it. What is a papyri funeral? It's a scroll of papyrus with religious images and hieroglyphs meant to help the deceased be reborn in the afterlife. For everyday purposes, however, scribes use a shorthand version of the hieroglyphic script known as hieratic, which was quicker to write and more economical. Two writings exist side by side for at least 2,500 years. Okay, so what do I see? Here I see that they really have primarily focused on describing the glyphs. That's just going to be my quick one-word annotation. If I want to know details about the glyphs, I'll go to the second paragraph. Paragraph 3. Scripts of ancient hieratic writing, mostly penned by student scribes on limestone flakes called ostraca, suggest that no matter how humble his origins, an educated Egyptian could achieve almost anything. Horemheb is a good example. Born of middle-ranking parents, his scribal training led to an army career. From scribe recruits during the reign of Akhenaten, Horemheb rose through the military ranks. By the rule of Tutankhamun, he was commander-in-chief of Egyptian forces. As a close advisor of the young pharaoh, Horemheb was appointed deputy of the king throughout two lands, might have expected to succeed to the throne should the king die childless. He had to wait a few years, but eventually achieved the pinnacle of his career. He became the last king, making his mark by instituting dramatic reforms to the organization of the army, judiciary, admin. Lasting a success of these changes owed to his scribal background. So this entire paragraph focuses, gives really one almost like case study or like highly focused example on Horemheb and writing and how that really, progressed his life or like basically career in a way. But education was not available to all. Government departments made or temple supported schools. Boys commenced training 6 or 7, sometimes earlier. To these boarding establishments, family or household servants delivered the students food and drink rations daily for several years, which during this time, student was not contributing to family's income. Boys with poor families could only hope to be educated with support, or through apprenticeship to an older scribe, perhaps a local clerk or land agent. This limited the scope for employment, but such on-the-job trainings allowed apprentices to help out at home while learning. So paragraph 4 is sort of about like, maybe inequities in the system or like the fact that it's not, available to everyone. Um, and paragraph 5 and 6. I'm gonna be reading these, but just so everyone's on the same page, but I might be sort of quickly scanning them. Just I really do want to get to like a math section as well. So please read along because I am not going to be reading word for word. Scribal education began with the elementary principles of the hieratic script. The lowliest scribes probably only learned the rudiments of the hieroglyphic script. So again, rudiments are basics. So lowliest learned the basics. Students were set exemplar documents and abstracts to copy to practice their writing, reports, and contracts while absorbing the good advice. Surviving examples of copy work include tutors' corrections. Some significant literary works survive almost from copies. So, in paragraph 5, they're sort of describing like student life. Paragraph 6, last one. School by Dictionary of Hieroglyphs with their hieratic equivalents show that a knowledge of more than 450 signs was required for writing. Lessons in record keeping and filing and labeling enabled any half-competent scribe to perform essential scribal functions. Professions of government officials, scribe would train for several more years, increasing his vocab. Those with the best handwriting or drawing skills might create illustrated copies. Doctors had their own collections. Lawyers had their own. Be a scribe was the best of career advice. So here we kind of see like almost like diversity in what being a scribe allows you to do. You can really do a lot of things. And what do we see here? We see a figure. It's very important to understand this. So, what is the class structure? You have unskilled workers at the bottom, followed by herders and farmers, traders, shopkeepers, scribes, artisans, nobility, priests, and the pharaoh at the top. Um, so, with sentence from the excerpt best supports the idea that there were different levels of education for a scribe. Okay, so let's see. A, contrary to popular belief, not all Egyptian scribes understood hieroglyphs. So this is about understanding hieroglyphs, not necessarily about um, you know, it's not necessarily about like what their levels of education were. For everyday purposes, scribe used shorthand of the hieroglyphic script known as hieratic, which was quicker, which was a quicker write and more economical of a space. This limited scope for employment, but such on-the-job training allowed apprentices to help out at home while learning. For professions such as those of a government official, priest, or lawyer, a scribe would train for several more years. So again, this is describing like different professions requiring more training. So let's see what the answer is. But before that, does anyone in the chat? I would like them to take a stab at this question and choose a choice. I'll just give them like a minute or two. Someone also asked a question that I just saw in the chat. How do you undo an elimination? So let's try that. So we eliminated this. Now we want to uneliminate it. So we just click it. We just click on it. So if I want to eliminate A, that's that. And if I want to undo my elimination, I just click on the choice again. Okay. I'm just gonna give people a minute or two to I'm just gonna give people a minute or two to take another stab at the question. And let's see what the answer is. The best answer is D. Why is D the best answer? D is describing the fact that certain professions require more training and an increase in vocabulary. This indicates that there is an opportunity for more education. Um, let's look at the rest of the choices. So C is saying this limited the scope for employment, but on the job training allowed apprentices to help out at home while learning. This is talking about you know, learning for an apprentice. But it's talking about it in the context of what? That not everyone has the opportunity, right? Like look at our global notepad. Paragraph 4 was about what? Paragraph 4 was about the fact that there are unequal opportunities and inequality exists. So in the context of that, it doesn't make sense. Um, B is just describing, the fact that there is a different form of the hieroglyphic script, which is the hieratic, not describing different educations. A is describing the fact that, just the fact that non-Egyptian scribes understood hieroglyphs. So D is the best answer. And I hope that makes some sense. So now I'm going to try to go to a math um, math section. But I also wanted to highlight, revising editing questions in the English language arts section. So again, here, what they're asking you to do is they are asking you to read the passage, and then this section is more so about sentence organization. So this is asking you what sentence should follow sentence three to best introduce the topic. So in order to understand that, you need to read the whole passage and understand what the passage is saying. So how you can best introduce the topic of the passage. Again, why it's so important to read the whole passage. What transition word or phrase should be added to the beginning of the sentence 5 to emphasize the relationship between 4 and 5? Now, see here, you're dragging and dropping. These are all things you should know of that questions can appear as before taking the test. This seems to be like, what sentence could best follow sentence 13 to support the ideas in the third paragraph. So now once again, you need to understand, each paragraph. What sentence should be deleted? So again, you would need to read the whole passage, understand what's sort of not fitting well, etc. So that was revising editing, and then there's also revising editing B. So here they're sort of talking specifically a little bit about grammar. So you want to look at pronouns. You want to look at sentence structure errors. So here they're testing your knowledge of, commas, semicolons, etc. Um, here they're saying, what are the errors in the passage and how can you correct them? So again, you need to really read carefully. And they've underlined what specific sentences they want you to look at. Here, they want you to, again, drag to the box. And I think what's interesting about this grammar section is that they're very specific in the terms. So here, for example, they're telling you there's an error in sentence construction, so you should understand what it means to construct a sentence and what that includes. And finally, we're on the math section. Um, Now, before going to the actual test, I want to quickly go through the math features. Um, so what do we see? Um, And again, just some quick high level overviews. This is what I said earlier. You want to note the sentence is about sentence construction. You want to know what revisions are needed, etc. So you really want to pay attention. You want to ask about how each sentence relates to one another, etc. Now the math section. So pretty much same features. But we also have an equation editor for certain questions. So again, they even tell you you should familiarize yourself with this tool. Um, Calculators are not permitted while taking the exam. That's important to know. Um, so that is that. Um, and then there are some sample problems. So we will go through those sample problems together. And just the point about the calculators. So the SHSAT is online, but again, there are designated locations where you take the test. So you simply cannot use a calculator. The exams are still proctored, things like that. So you should be preparing for this test the way that you're going to take it, which is without a calculator. Alrighty. Okay. In a scale diagram, 0.125 inches represents 125 feet. How many inches represent 1 foot? Okay. So, what features do we have here? We have the same features, background, foreground, magnifier, line reader mask. We have our global notepad, which actually carries over from humanities section to now. We have elimination. We don't have like the equation one, that's not relevant for this. So, then you would basically answer, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, you don't see the problem screen. Sorry, thank you. This was the problem screen. So I was just going through the features. So once again, it's the same thing. You have the background color, magnifier, line meter mask. You have the global notepad, which is stayed and saved from everything else. You have process elimination. Um, so this is the question. In a scale diagram, 0.125 inches is 125 feet. How many inches represent 1 foot? So I'm gonna give students a minute to just go through this problem and try answering it, and then we can go through it together. And I will say that from what I'm seeing is that scrap paper for calculations and notes is available. So that is good. They will give you scrap paper. So obviously like these types of math problems would be challenging without it. So I'm gonna try to use the Zoom keypad or use the online Zoom annotation feature to go through this with you all. It might not be the neatest just because I am on Zoom, but obviously for this type of question, I would recommend um, using scrap paper. Um, all right. So what do we see here? Um, we see what we can do is we can set up a proportion or just understand the relationships from one thing to another. So if 0.125 inches equals 125 feet, how many inches represent 1 foot? So what do I see here? I see that to get from inches to feet, I'm multiplying by 1,000. So for example, to go from here to here, I am multiplying by 1,000. And to go in the opposite direction, to go from here to here, I am dividing by 1,000. So for this type of question, to go from 1 foot back to inches, what would I do? I would divide by 1,000. So 1 divided by 1,000 gives me choice A. Now let's see if that is correct. Yes, A is correct. And as you can see, you can set up a proportion. So they're giving you a definition, 0.25 inches to 0.125 inches to 125 feet. And then you set the proportion inches with respect to feet, and then you cross multiply and solve. Um, and that is what people chose in the messages they sent me, so that's great. Um, I did get a request to show the equation editor, and I do want to go through that. So let's see. So as you can see, this is also a different type of question. We need to answer your answer. So let's go through this together. For what value of W is 4W equals 2W minus 8? So again, 4W equals 2W minus 8. Again, for math questions, I would highly recommend doing this on paper, pencil, old school style. What do I want to do to solve this question? I need to solve for W. How am I going to do that? I'm going to isolate W on one side. How am I going to do that? I'm going to subtract 2W from both sides. So minus 2W minus 2W. That gets me what? So 4 minus 2, 4W minus 2W is just 2W. 2W minus 2W crosses out to 0. And then you just have the -8 there. Remember to keep the sign. So if 2W equals -8, how do I isolate W by itself? I divide by 2 on both sides, so then W equals -4. So let's see, W equals -4. And the exhibit says what? Exactly that. I'm just going to clear my annotations. Just trying to show you all different types of questions. All right. So here again, you're choosing and from the drop-down menu. This is also something important to understand. This is a type of question, fill in the blank. We did this already. Select the 2 correct answers. Now, this is interesting because that means you need to like you need to understand um that 2 answers can be correct at the same time. So just in terms of logic, the sum of these 3 expressions, like it doesn't make sense for the answer to both equal 18 and equal 34. If you're adding these together, it can only give you one number. And so it doesn't make sense to choose 18 and 34 because 18 is not equal to 34. But let's just approach this like the mathematical way. I think this is kind of a challenging question, probably our last one. And actually, since they have it written out nicely, I'm just going to use the answer key to go through it. Just because it's going to take me some time to go through on Zoom. So what are they saying? What is the sum of the expressions? In order to get the sum, you would add everything. What do they add? So they chose to work with the 5 minus n first. Again, this is a matter of preference. It just like probably looks nicer, right? So 5 minus n, and then you're adding 3 times 2n plus 7. So you're adding this expression, and then you're adding what? You're adding this expression. They just wrote it out. Then what do they do? So you need to distribute this 3 to the 2n and the 7, and this -2 to this and this. So when you're distributing, you get 3 times 2 is 6. That's where they get the 6n from. Positive 3 times positive 7 is positive 21. So this expression, 3 times 2n plus 7, is this. 6n plus 21. They did the same exact thing here. -2 times 2.5n, -5n, -2 times positive 4, -8. So in this part is from this part of the expression, and then the 5 minus n just carries over from here. Now what they're doing is they are combining and solving. So you get 6n, positive 6n minus 5n, which is 1n, minus n is just 0. And then so this all cancels out to 0. So 0 plus 21 plus 5 minus 8 is 18. So now you know that the number is 18, but you also know that what did this work out to? This worked out to this entire expression, which was choice um, this choice plus 21 minus 5 minus 8. Sorry, minus 8. So A. So again, just to show you a different type of question where, you need to understand what they're asking you. You also need to choose carefully between the choices because they look very similar. This choice and this choice only differ by the addition mark. And lastly, you need to think critically. It cannot make sense that 18 and 34 are both the correct answer because that would mean the sum is both 18 and 34. That just doesn't make sense. So, that was a lot of information in the span of 1 hour. I hope that this was helpful to everyone. And I also hope that this gave students not only a chance to look at, the actual material they need to learn, um, but also think about the strategies that are important for them to think about before preparing for the exam. So with that, I just want to end the webinar. I hope that this was helpful to everyone. And if there are any questions, feel free to contact Francis, who can put you in the right resources. Thank you so much, everyone.